Zeftar moved through the massive archive halls with practiced ease. His forearms worked quickly, pulling data crystals from storage units that stretched higher than most buildings. As the chief archivist of the Galactic Council, he had seen every kind of record imaginable. Wars, peace treaties, first contact protocols, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. But today, something bothered him. The quarterly systems check had flagged an anomaly in Sector 7 Alpha. It was a small notation, buried deep in files that most people had forgotten existed. The sector had been under quarantine for 500 years. Most council members didn't even remember why. Zeftar's primary eyes scanned the ancient records, while his secondary eyes watched for approaching staff members. The Galactic Council governed 847 different species, across thousands of star systems. Everyone was always busy with current problems. Nobody cared about old files from sectors that had been written off centuries ago. The first document made him pause. It was a first contact report from 523 years ago. A young star system in the Orion Arm had been discovered. The third planet showed signs of primitive, intelligent life. The species called themselves humans and had just developed basic spaceflight. Standard protocol should have been simple: make contact, evaluate their development level, and either welcome them into galactic society or wait for them to advance further. But something had gone wrong. Zeftar pulled up the next file. His breath caught in his throat. The contact team had been carrying experimental nanoscale machines. These tiny robots were designed to help primitive species adapt to galactic technology over thousands of years. But there had been an accident during the first meeting. The entire batch of nanomachines had been released into Earth's atmosphere. Within hours, every human on the planet had been infected. The contact team's report was filled with panic. The humans were changing too fast. Their behavior became unpredictable. Some gained incredible strength. Others developed enhanced intelligence, almost overnight. The Council's response had been swift and brutal. Sector 7 Alpha was declared a quarantine zone. All travel to the area was banned. The humans were left alone with technology that could either kill them or transform them in ways nobody understood. Zeftar continued reading. The early monitoring reports painted a grim picture. Human cities burned as people struggled with their rapid changes. Governments collapsed. Wars broke out between those who had adapted to the nanomachines and those who had not. The Council observers predicted complete extinction within 50 years. But then something strange happened. The reports became less frequent. The monitoring stations started experiencing technical problems. Communication arrays failed one by one. The last clear signal from Sector 7 Alpha had been received over 200 years ago. The official explanation was stellar interference. The human star system had become unstable, creating electromagnetic storms that blocked all long-range communication. Most Council scientists agreed that the humans had probably destroyed themselves long ago. The nanomachines had been too advanced for such a primitive species to handle. Zeftar found the final report in the series. It was brief and cold. Subject species presumed extinct. Quarantine maintained for safety. Monitoring suspended due to technical impossibility. Sector 7, Alpha, classified as Dead Zone. That had been written 184 years ago. Since then, nobody had bothered to check on the forgotten humans. Zeftar's secondary arms worked at his data terminal, while his primary hands continued sorting through physical files. The current Council leadership had never even heard of Sector 7 Alpha. Most of the officials who had been present during the original incident were long dead or retired. He found personnel records for the contact team that had caused the disaster, all deceased. The lead scientist had written several papers about the dangers of accelerated evolution before taking his own life 50 years after the incident. The trauma of potentially causing an entire species extinction had driven him mad. The more Zeftar read, the more concerned he became. The quarantine zone contained not just Earth, but 8 other planets in the same star system. Some had shown signs of primitive life. If the nanomachines had spread beyond Earth, there was no telling what might have developed in 500 years of isolation. He pulled up current stellar charts. Sector 7 Alpha was marked with simple warning symbols. Biological contamination. Entry forbidden. The coordinates were listed. but no detailed information was provided. Most navigation systems would automatically route ships around the area. Zeftar realized that an entire section of the galaxy had been ignored for centuries. Nobody knew what was happening there. The monitoring systems had failed so long ago that current technology might be able to penetrate whatever interference was blocking communication. He began drafting a report for the council leadership. As he wrote, he tried to imagine what they might find if they sent a ship to investigate. The most likely scenario was empty space and dead planets. The humans had probably died out within the first century, victims of technology they couldn't understand or control. But there was another possibility that made Zeftar's skin crawl with unease. What if the humans had survived? What if they had not just adapted to the nanomachines, but mastered them? 500 years was a long time for any species to develop, especially one enhanced by advanced technology. Zeftar finished his report and marked it for immediate review by the Council's Executive Committee. He recommended sending a single scout ship to perform a basic survey of Sector 7 Alpha. Nothing dramatic, just a quick check to verify that the quarantine zone was still empty and harmless. As he sealed the report and prepared it for transmission, Zeftar couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to unleash something significant. The humans had been forgotten for good reasons. The Council had learned from that disaster and developed better protocols for first contact situations. But now, centuries later, someone would finally return to see what had become of the species that had been left alone with technology beyond their understanding. Zeftar just hoped that whoever reviewed his report would treat it as the routine matter he had tried to make it seem. The last thing anyone wanted was for the Council to panic about threats that probably didn't exist anymore. Scout Commander Krill Vex stretched her tentacles across the control console of the survey ship Times Silent Observer **. She had been assigned what should have been the most boring mission of her career: check on an old quarantine zone, confirm that nothing was alive there, and return with a brief report saying the area was still safe to ignore. The Council Executive Committee had barely glanced at the archivist's recommendation. Counselor Prime Vex High had signed off on the mission during a routine administrative session, probably without even reading the full request. A single scout ship seemed like overkill for investigating a dead star system. But protocols required some kind of official response. Krillvex had been chosen because she was reliable, thorough, and unlikely to cause problems. Her service record showed 14 successful survey missions with no complications. She followed orders, filed accurate reports, and never asked unnecessary questions. Perfect for a routine verification sweep. The jump into Sector 7 Alpha went smoothly. Krillvex's instruments began their automatic scans as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. She expected to see empty space, maybe some debris from ancient battles, and the cold radiation signature of dead planets. Instead, her warning systems immediately began screaming. The scanner displays lit up with impossible readings. Massive energy signatures throughout the star system. Organized electromagnetic patterns that could only come from advanced technology. Artificial structures so large that her computer initially classified them as natural phenomena. Krillvex ran the scans 3 times, convinced that her equipment was malfunctioning. But every reading confirmed the same incredible truth. The Sector 7 Alpha system was not dead. It was more active than most core worlds. The third planet from the star showed energy patterns that made no sense. Vast networks of lights covered entire continents. Orbital stations surrounded the planet in carefully organized patterns. Space traffic moved between multiple worlds in the system like a busy commercial hub. But that was impossible. According to the records, this system had been quarantined for 500 years. No ships were supposed to have entered the area since the original disaster. Yet the sensor readings showed a thriving civilization with technology that rivaled the most advanced Council member species. Krillvex focused her scans on the primary planet. Her instruments detected fusion reactors, antimatter containment systems, and energy signatures that her computer couldn't even identify. Whatever the humans had become, they were no longer primitive. She tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The old records mentioned nanoscale machines that could accelerate evolution. But 5 centuries seemed impossible for any species to advance so far. Even the most successful civilizations in galactic history had taken millennia to develop such sophisticated technology. Following standard first contact protocols, Krillvex activated her communication systems and began broadcasting a standard greeting in Galactic Standard. The message identified her as a representative of the Galactic Council and requested permission to establish diplomatic contact. The response came back in less than 30 seconds. Not only did someone answer, but they answered in perfect Galactic Standard. The voice was clearly human, but spoke with an accent Krillvex had never heard before. More disturbing was what the human said. "Welcome to Earth, Scout Commander Krillvex. We've been monitoring your approach since you entered our system. Your ship is a modified Council Survey-class vessel, registration number 7749 Delta Prime. Your crew consists of one individual of Zerathi species, age approximately 47 standard years." Krillvex felt her blood run cold. That information was classified. Her ship's registration was encrypted, and her personal details should have been impossible to detect from a distance. The human voice continued, still polite but with an undertone that suggested vast capability held in check. "We understand you're here to verify the status of our quarantine zone. We're quite aware of our isolation, and we're also aware that the Galactic Council has largely forgotten about us. We don't hold any grudges about that. It's been a very productive 500 years. Krillvex tried to respond, but found herself speechless. Everything about this situation violated her understanding of what was possible. Humans were supposed to be extinct. The quarantine zone should have been empty space. Instead, she was talking to someone who seemed to know more about her mission than she did. "Commander Krillvex," the human voice said gently. "We know this must be surprising. Would you like us to explain what happened here, or would you prefer to conduct your own investigation first? We're happy to accommodate either approach." Finding her voice, Krillvex managed to stammer. "How did you know my name? How did you scan my ship? Our security systems should have prevented any unauthorized access." There was what sounded like a soft chuckle from the other end of the communication channel. "Commander, your security systems are based on technology that's about 400 years out of date by our current standards. We're not trying to be threatening, but we wanted you to understand that we've developed significantly during our isolation." Krillvex began frantically typing commands into her console, trying to send an emergency message back to Council space. She needed to report these impossible developments immediately, but as she prepared to transmit her emergency beacon, something strange happened. Her message was intercepted before it could leave the ship. Not blocked or jammed, but gently edited. When she reviewed what her systems were preparing to send, she found that several key details had been changed. References to impossible technology had become advanced development. Mentions of security breaches had been softened to unexpected capabilities. A new message appeared on her communication screen. "Commander, we apologize for the intrusion into your systems. We wanted to ensure that your report to the Council would be accurate rather than panic-inducing. We've attached our own files about what we've accomplished during our quarantine period. Your people deserve to know the truth, but they also deserve to understand that we're not a threat." The attached files began downloading automatically. Krillvex watched in growing amazement as detailed technical specifications, historical records, and scientific achievements filled her ship's databanks. The humans hadn't just survived their isolation. They had transformed themselves into something that challenged every assumption about what was possible for organic life. The final file was a simple message. "We would very much like to rejoin galactic civilization. We have a great deal to offer, and we believe there are challenges facing the galaxy that we could help address. Would the Council be interested in reconsidering our quarantine status?" Krillvex stared at her screens, trying to process what had just happened. She had come expecting to file a routine report about empty space. Instead, she found herself serving as the first contact between humanity and the rest of the galaxy after 5 centuries of isolation. And based on what she had seen so far, the humans were no longer the primitive species that had been quarantined long ago. They had become something entirely new, and possibly more advanced than any civilization in known space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of receiving Scout Commander Krillvex's report. Representatives from 847 species gathered in the massive council chamber on Central Station, their voices creating a chaos of different languages and communication methods as they tried to understand what they were hearing. Counselor Prime Vex High stood at the center podium, his scaled face showing the strain of the past few hours. He had been forced to read Krill Vex's report 3 times before accepting that it wasn't some kind of elaborate mistake or practical joke. The implications were staggering. The scout ship's findings have been verified by our best analysts, Vex High announced, his voice cutting through the noise in the chamber. The quarantine zone, designated as Sector 7 Alpha, is not empty. The human species has not only survived but has developed technology that exceeds most of our member civilizations. A wave of disbelief swept through the chamber. Representative Tholok of the Vrex Confederation raised his massive clawed hand. This must be an error. Our records clearly show that the humans were infected with experimental nanomachines over 500 years ago. No species could survive such exposure, let alone thrive. Vex High activated the main display screen. Data from Krill Vex's survey filled the air above the assembled representatives. Energy readings, technological signatures, and the recorded communications played for everyone to hear. The human voice speaking perfect galactic standard sent ripples of concern through the crowd. The evidence is undeniable, Vex High continued. But the attached files provided by the humans themselves tell an even more remarkable story. The first file began playing. It was a historical record narrated by what appeared to be a human scientist. The being looked mostly like the original species, but there were subtle differences. The eyes seemed brighter, more aware. The movements were too fluid, too precise. The nanomachines introduced to our world in the year 2157 were initially devastating, the human narrator explained. Our species underwent rapid changes that our society couldn't handle. Cities burned, governments fell, and we faced near extinction within the first 50 years. Representative Quill Nara of the Floating Cities hissed in her native language before switching to Galactic Standard. This confirms our historical records. The humans should have destroyed themselves. The human continued, but approximately 70 years after the initial exposure, we began to understand what was happening to us. The nanomachines weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to help us evolve. Once we stopped fighting the changes and began working with them, everything transformed. The display shifted to show images of human cities unlike anything in the galactic database. Buildings that seemed to grow rather than being constructed. Transportation systems that moved without visible power sources. Humans working alongside machines in perfect harmony. We learned to integrate with the nanoscale technology, the narrator explained. Every human is now a hybrid biological technological entity. We can interface directly with our machines, adapt to new environments within days, and share knowledge instantaneously across our entire species. The council chamber erupted in fearful discussion. Representative Zekmon of the Crystal World stood up, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber lights. This is exactly what we feared would happen. They've become something that shouldn't exist. But the human files weren't finished. The next section showed space-based achievements that made several representatives gasp in shock. Humans had not only colonized every planet in their star system but had built structures that defied known physics. Orbital rings that shouldn't have been possible with any known materials. Ships that seemed to move through space in ways that violated basic principles of propulsion. During our isolation, we've had time to fully explore the possibilities of our enhancement, the human narrator continued. We've solved problems that have challenged galactic civilization for millennia. Energy production, faster-than-light travel, environmental restoration, and even life extension. The final section of the presentation was what truly terrified the assembled representatives. The humans revealed that they had not been completely isolated during their quarantine. They had been observing galactic civilization for over 2 centuries. We respect the quarantine that was placed around our system, the human said. But we've maintained hidden observation posts throughout the galaxy. We've watched your wars, studied your technology, and even prevented several extinction-level events that your species never detected. The display showed star charts marking locations where humans claimed to have maintained secret facilities. The coordinates included systems deep in core world territory, areas that should have been impossible for anyone to access without detection. Representative Korvash of the Military Oversight Committee stood up, his forearms crossed in a gesture of extreme alarm. "Are you telling us that these humans have been spying on us for centuries? That they've had access to our most secure systems?" Vexhai nodded grimly. "The files include detailed records of 17 different crisis events that were resolved by human intervention. Solar flares that should have destroyed inhabited worlds were mysteriously deflected. Asteroid impacts that would have caused mass extinctions were prevented by unexplained course changes. Several attempted invasions by hostile forces were stopped by equipment failures that our investigators attributed to chance." The implications hit the chamber like a wave. The humans hadn't just survived their quarantine. They had become the secret protectors of a galactic civilization that didn't even know they existed. Representative Silktar of the Harmony Worlds spoke in a whisper that somehow carried across the chamber. "If they've been protecting us without our knowledge, what else are they capable of?" As if in response to her question, every communication system in the council chamber activated simultaneously. The message didn't come through normal channels or security protocols. It simply appeared on every screen, in every personal device, and even in the translation matrices of species who communicated through methods other than sound. The message was simple and polite, but its method of delivery was more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," the text began. "We, the human species of Sector 7 Alpha, formally request permission to rejoin galactic civilization. Our quarantine has served its purpose. We have mastered the technology that was accidentally introduced to our world, and we believe we can contribute significantly to the continued peace and prosperity of all galactic species." The message continued with technical specifications that proved human knowledge of Council technology far exceeded what should have been possible. They provided exact details of current military deployments, economic projections for the next 50 years, and solutions to 17 ongoing galactic problems that the Council's best scientists had been struggling with for decades. But the final paragraph was what made every representative in the chamber realize that their universe had fundamentally changed. "We are also obligated to inform you that the galaxy faces an imminent threat that requires immediate attention. Long-range stellar observations indicate an expanding wave of dark matter that will destabilize outer rim star systems within 50 standard years. We have developed preliminary countermeasures, but success will require the cooperation of all galactic civilizations. We hope that our emergence from quarantine can mark the beginning of a new era of cooperation in the face of this challenge." The chamber fell silent. The humans weren't just asking to rejoin galactic society. They were offering to save it. Admiral Korzeth had commanded the 5th Battle Fleet for over 30 years. He had fought pirates, suppressed rebellions, and maintained peace across 17 different star systems. In all that time, he had never encountered a situation that made him question the superiority of Council military technology. Until now. The Council's emergency military session had been heated and brief. Representatives from the more aggressive species argued that humanity's claims were obviously exaggerated. No single species could advance so dramatically in just 5 centuries. The humans were probably using stolen technology or had received help from unknown sources. The decision was made quickly. The 5th Battle Fleet would travel to Sector 7 Alpha, assess the actual threat level, and if necessary, re-establish the quarantine by force. Admiral Korzeth was chosen to lead the mission because of his reputation for decisive action and his ability to make difficult choices under pressure. As the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human system, Korzeth felt confident in his orders. His ships represented the peak of galactic military technology. The fleet included 47 heavy cruisers, 156 strike fighters, and the massive flagship times Council's Authority ***. No known force in the galaxy could stand against such firepower. The first scans of the system immediately challenged that confidence. "Admiral," reported Commander Yilsek from the sensor station, "I'm reading human vessels throughout the system, but they don't match any known ship designs." Korzeth moved to review the sensor data himself. The human ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. They appeared to be grown rather than built. with flowing organic shapes that somehow looked both beautiful and threatening. More disturbing was their size. Several vessels were larger than his flagship, and they moved through space in ways that seemed to ignore basic physics. "How many ships are we detecting?" Korzeth asked. "That's the problem, Admiral. The number keeps changing. Ships appear and disappear from our sensors as if they're moving in and out of normal space. Current count is approximately 300 vessels, but I can't guarantee accuracy." Korzeth activated the fleet communication system and transmitted the standard demand for surrender. His message was broadcast on all frequencies, demanding that human forces stand down and prepare for inspection under the authority of the Galactic Council. The response came back immediately, and it wasn't what he expected. "Admiral Korzeth," the human voice said, speaking directly to him by name, "we welcome you to our system. However, we must point out that your current approach constitutes an act of war against a sovereign civilization. We would prefer to resolve this situation peacefully." Korzeth felt his scales bristle with irritation. "Unknown human vessel. You are operating in violation of a long-standing quarantine. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." "Admiral," the human responded, and Korzeth could hear something that might have been amusement in the voice. "We're afraid we can't do that, but we would like to demonstrate something to help you understand your current situation." Before Korzeth could ask what they meant, every weapon system on every ship in his fleet went offline simultaneously. The Admiral's command staff erupted into frantic activity as they tried to understand what had happened. Ship after ship reported the same impossible situation. Their weapons weren't damaged or destroyed, they simply wouldn't function. Energy couldn't build up in the charging systems. Targeting computers refused to lock onto human vessels. Even the manual backup systems failed to respond. "This is impossible," Commander Yilsek reported. "Our weapons are controlled by completely independent systems. There's no way they could all be disabled simultaneously without physical damage." The human voice returned to the communication channel. "Admiral, your weapons have not been harmed. We've simply convinced them not to work for a few minutes. We wanted to demonstrate that this confrontation doesn't need to involve violence." As if to prove their point, 3 human vessels suddenly appeared directly alongside the Times Council's authority asterisk, not approached or flew toward, but simply materialized next to the flagship without triggering any of the ship's defensive systems. Korzeth watched in growing horror as the human ships seemed to phase through his vessel's shields as if they didn't exist. According to every law of physics he understood, such a thing was impossible. Shields created barriers in space-time itself. Nothing should have been able to pass through them without enormous energy expenditure. "Admiral," came a new voice from the ship's internal communication system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Diplomatic Corps. I'm currently aboard your ship with a small team. Please don't be alarmed. We're here to talk." The security alerts that should have triggered when unauthorized beings boarded the flagship remained silent. Korzeth's command staff looked around in confusion as they realized that their most secure vessel had been infiltrated without triggering a single warning system. Captain Chen entered the bridge through the main doors, as if she had been invited. She appeared to be a normal human female, but Korzeth's trained eye noticed details that marked her as something far beyond baseline biology. Her movements were too fluid, her awareness too complete, and there was something in her eyes that suggested intelligence operating on levels he couldn't comprehend. "Admiral Korzeth," she said politely, "thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I understand that our capabilities must seem threatening, but we want you to know that we have no hostile intentions toward the Council or any of its member species." Behind Captain Chen, 2 other humans entered the bridge. They carried no visible weapons, but Korzeth's survival instincts screamed warnings about how dangerous they might be. Everything about their presence suggested beings who had moved far beyond the limitations that constrained normal biological life. "How did you get aboard my ship?" Korzeth demanded. "How did you disable our weapons? This technology shouldn't exist." Captain Chen smiled, and the expression was genuinely friendly despite the circumstances. "Admiral, the technology we use is based on the same nanomachines that were accidentally released on our world 5 centuries ago. We've learned to manipulate matter and energy on a molecular level. Your shields work by creating barriers in normal space. We simply step outside normal space temporarily. She gestured to a display panel that activated at her approach, showing technical readouts that hurt Korzeth's brain to look at. The mathematics involved concepts that went beyond his training. We understand that this must be frightening, Captain Chen continued. When a species develops capabilities that others don't possess, it often leads to conflict. But we want to show you something that we hope will help you understand why we're revealing ourselves now. The display changed to show long-range stellar observations. Korzeth recognized some of the star systems. But the data being displayed was unlike anything he had seen before. Massive gravitational anomalies were moving through space, leaving destabilized stars and collapsing planetary systems in their wake. This is a wave of dark matter moving through the galaxy, Captain Chen explained. It's invisible to most detection methods, but its effects on normal matter are catastrophic. Our calculations indicate that it will reach the core worlds within 50 standard years. The images showed the projected path of destruction. Hundreds of inhabited systems lay in the path of whatever was approaching. The death toll would be beyond calculation. Your council's technology cannot detect this threat, let alone stop it, Captain Chen said. But our enhanced capabilities allow us to see it clearly and to develop countermeasures. This is why we're asking to rejoin galactic civilization, not because we need help, but because the galaxy needs ours. Admiral Korzeth stared at the data, trying to process what he was seeing. If the humans were telling the truth, then the greatest military force in known space was useless against a threat that could destroy galactic civilization. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Captain Chen's smile became sad. We want to go home, Admiral. We want to rejoin the community that we were forced to leave 5 centuries ago, and we want to help save everyone from something that's coming, whether we're united or not. The Great Council Chamber had never seen debates like this in its 3,000-year history. Representatives from 847 different species argued, pleaded, and threatened each other as they tried to decide the fate of galactic civilization. At the center of it all was a simple question. Should humanity be allowed to rejoin the community they had been forced to leave 5 centuries ago? Counselor Prime Vexhai had barely slept in the 5 days since Admiral Korzeth's fleet returned with their impossible report. The humans had allowed the military force to leave their system unharmed, but not unchanged. Every ship carried detailed technical specifications, scientific data, and proof of the dark matter threat that was moving toward inhabited space. The evidence was undeniable, but the implications terrified half the council. Representative Tholak of the Vrex Confederation stood at the speaking platform, his massive form radiating anger and fear. These humans are not the same species we quarantined 5 centuries ago. They have become something alien, something dangerous. How can we trust beings who have evolved beyond our understanding? His words drew support from dozens of other representatives. The Military Oversight Committee had presented their own analysis, describing human capabilities as a fundamental threat to the existing order. If humanity possessed technology that could disable council fleets without violence, what would stop them from simply taking control of galactic civilization? Representative Quil Nara of the Floating Cities rose to respond. The humans could have destroyed Admiral Korzeth's fleet without effort. Instead, they disabled weapons without causing harm and sent our ships home with information we desperately needed. What kind of conquerors behave like that? The debate had been raging for days, with arguments growing more heated as the full scope of human advancement became clear. The technical specifications they had provided showed solutions to problems that had challenged galactic science for millennia. Their energy production methods could solve resource shortages. Their space manipulation technology could revolutionize transportation. Their biological enhancement techniques could extend the lifespans of every species in the Council. But such capabilities also meant that humanity no longer needed anything that galactic civilization could offer them. They weren't asking to rejoin as junior partners or refugees seeking help. They were proposing to enter the Council as equals, possibly as the most advanced species in known space. Representative Korvash of the Military Oversight Committee activated his speaking platform. The question is not whether the humans are hostile. The question is whether we can maintain our independence if we allow them to return. They have watched us for centuries without our knowledge. They have technology we cannot match. What happens to the Council's authority if we accept their membership? Councillor Prime Vex High called for order, as the chamber erupted in competing voices. The political implications were staggering. Species that had dominated council politics for centuries would suddenly find themselves technologically inferior to former primitives. Trade relationships would collapse, military hierarchies would become meaningless. But then Representative Zekmon of the Crystal World spoke, and his words cut through the chaos like a blade. None of our political concerns will matter if we're all dead. The chamber fell silent as he activated the main display. The images showed long-range sensor data that the Council's best scientists had been analyzing for the past 3 days. The human warnings about dark matter expansion had been verified by independent observation. The humans were right, Zekmon continued. There is something moving through outer rim space that our instruments can barely detect. 3-star systems have already shown signs of stellar instability that match human predictions. If their timeline is correct, we have less than 50 years before this threat reaches inhabited worlds. The display showed projected casualty figures that made several representatives leave the chamber. Billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. The complete collapse of galactic civilization. An extinction event that would dwarf anything in recorded history. Our best scientists have analyzed the data, Zekmon said. We have no technology that could address this threat. We cannot even detect it reliably, let alone stop it. But the humans can see it clearly, and they claim to have developed countermeasures. Representative Silktar of the Harmony Worlds asked the question that everyone was thinking. What guarantee do we have that the humans will help us if we refuse their membership request? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice spoke from the chamber's communication system, bypassing all security protocols just as it had during the previous human contact. Representative Silktar, the human voice said, "We understand your concern, but we want you to know that we will provide assistance against the dark matter threat, regardless of the Council's decision regarding our membership status. Our species remembers being part of galactic civilization. We will not allow it to be destroyed, even if you choose to exclude us from it." The casual demonstration of technological superiority sent ripples of unease through the chamber. But the message itself was reassuring. The humans weren't using the crisis as leverage to force their readmission to the Council. Councillor Prime Vex High stepped forward to address the chamber. We face an unprecedented decision. The humans are offering us advanced technology, protection from an existential threat, and partnership in a new era of galactic development. But accepting their offer means admitting that our civilization is no longer the most advanced in known space. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who had governed the galaxy for centuries. The alternative is to maintain our pride while our worlds burn. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. 439 representatives voted to accept humanity's membership request. 408 voted against it. It was the narrowest margin in Council history for such a significant decision, but it was enough. The formal announcement was transmitted throughout galactic space within hours. The quarantine around Sector 7 Alpha was officially lifted. Humanity was welcomed back into the Galactic Council. Not as the primitive species that had been isolated 5 centuries ago, but as the most technologically advanced civilization in known space. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, human ships appeared in systems throughout the galaxy. Not warships or invasion fleets, but research vessels and construction platforms. They began building defensive installations and monitoring stations designed to detect and counter the approaching dark matter wave. Zeftar, the archivist whose discovery had started everything, was assigned to document the changes as they occurred. His updated reports described a transformation that defied all previous understanding of how civilizations developed. Human-guided evacuation plans were developed for worlds in the path of the dark matter expansion. New technologies were shared freely with any species willing to learn. Research stations appeared in empty space, studying threats that most civilizations couldn't even detect. But perhaps most remarkably, the humans seemed genuinely happy to be home. Their communications with other species were warm and respectful. They shared their advanced knowledge without demanding anything in return. They treated former council leaders as valued partners rather than obsolete predecessors. The final entry in Zeftar's report noted that the quarantine zone designation for Sector 7 Alpha had been officially changed. The system was now classified as the Human Protection Sector, serving as the headquarters for the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative. The greatest fear in Council history had become its greatest hope. The humans hadn't returned as conquerors or refugees. They had come home as protectors, ready to defend a civilization that had once rejected them. And as the first defensive platforms came online in outer rim systems, successfully deflecting the leading edge of the dark matter expansion, it became clear that the Council's most fortunate accident had been learning to trust the species they had tried so hard to forget.